This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Welcome to our new patrons this week, Samir, Johnny, and Jordan. Visit our Patreon page and vote for next week's video. People have a strange fascination with stories about violent, tortured characters. Scorsese is a master at putting these stories on screen, as many of his movies explore the lives of people that aren't exactly role models. Jake LaMotta is one of those people, and Raging Bull is one of those movies.
A champion gone down to defeat.
While it may not be the most rewatchable work in Scorsese's filmography, the black and white film about a man's capacity to self-destruct acted as one of the filmmaker's most important statements of what film can ultimately aspire to. Raging Bull is not a boxing movie. It's a film about a man's inability to cope with his jealousy and anger, completely blinded by his sexual insecurities. The ring is his confession room, the punches he receives his punishment. The best stories are intimate, and Raging Bull is no exception. Today we'll analyze the techniques used to make this classic film so effective, and how a movie about self-destructive brutality saved Martin Scorsese's career, and maybe even his own life.
And the winner, by unanimous decision, in 10 rounds, Jake LaMotta.
The story behind Raging Bull is almost as interesting as the film itself. Scorsese actually had no interest in directing the movie, having rejected Robert De Niro, who presented the book to him several times in the late 70s. The director said he had no idea what the story was about, and he was never a fan of sports, which made it very hard to convince him to make the movie. But things were about to drastically change for him. At the turn of the decade, Scorsese was devastated by the poor commercial reception of his latest film, New York, New York, which was only followed by a cocaine overdose that nearly killed the young filmmaker. De Niro visited Scorsese in the hospital, and at that point in their lives, they were both, in De Niro's own words, like brothers. He had been obsessing over this story for years, and he knew Scorsese was the man for the job. The real question was whether Scorsese would make any new films at all, let alone one as emotionally taxing as Raging Bull. Finally, he realized this was a story about a man eaten alive by his own uncontrollable emotions, who lashed out at anyone who was trying to help him. Relating to his own life, Scorsese saw Jake LaMotta's story as an avenue for redemption. Besides, this way he would be able to save his own life and not to mention his career. Having related very personally to Raging Bull, he saw in it how the boxing ring can be an allegory for whatever you do in life. You make movies, you're in the ring each time. De Niro went through extensive training to prepare for the role and was trained by none other than the real Jake LaMotta. He found boxing came naturally to him, and even entered 3 fights in Brooklyn, of which he won 2. According to LaMotta, De Niro was one of the top 20 middleweight boxers of all time. Preparation for the film began with some shots of De Niro boxing in a ring. When the footage was reviewed, they noted that the color of the gloves at the time had to be maroon, oxblood, or even black. This contributed as one of the main reasons to film the movie in black and white. But another reason would be to distinguish Raging Bull from other color films around at the time, especially Rocky. The black and white photography by Michael Chapman, as well as the clothes and environment, successfully capture the spirit of the 1940s. The opening credits of the film are so brilliant because they tell you everything you need to know about Jake LaMotta. His shadow boxing is the ultimate performance of masculinity, showing his strength and rage. The ring almost looks like a cage, making Jake look like a wild beast. There's no one around. He's fighting his toughest opponent, himself. This illustrates Jake's necessity to constantly sabotage his own life due to his own neuroses, fighting back without the need to do so. The music elevates the scene to a dreamlike scenario, making Jake's furious display look like a truly graceful performance. Because of his lack of interest in sports, Scorsese never wanted the film to be a realistic depiction of boxing. Instead, he created beautiful dreamlike sequences, where the brutality of boxing is shifted into opera. It was mentioned before that this isn't a boxing movie. At its core, Raging Bull deals with a man's failure to overcome his sexual insecurity and rage. A woman in Jake LaMotta's mind can only be 2 things: a virgin, or a whore.
Who's that girl?
When Vicky shows up for the first time, we see a teenager who seems much older than her age. We notice how she's already cool with the mobsters and has a supremely confident gaze. She knows the score and calculates her way to get it.
Nice car.
When Jake sees her for the first time, in his mind she acts as an unattainable goddess, an inaccessible sexual fantasy. But then when he does get her, he becomes insecure and obsessed by his jealousy. Freud famously coined this term as the Madonna whore complex. This basically means that Jake desires a woman who he perceives as a virgin, a saint. Any woman who isn't a virgin is a slut, so when he gets together with Vicky, his holy image of her fades away. Jake is so insecure about his own masculinity that he wants a woman to sleep with him, but if she does, he cannot respect her, because in his mind, she would probably rather sleep with anyone else. Once they marry, he becomes convinced that she has been unfaithful. Through point-of-view shots in slow motion, Scorsese is able to transmit his jealousy. In some of these scenes, Vicky seems to float towards other men. This illustrates LaMotta's exaggeration of any event that involves his wife talking to men. This insecurity even gets to the point where Jake is so sure that Vicky has cheated on him with his brother Joey.
Did you fuck my brother? Huh?
Get off me, you fat pig!
Did you?
This is one of De Niro's best performances. It's one where the character he plays is never really introspective, nor does he express his feelings in the form of a voiceover like in other Scorsese films, or even through expository dialogue. But his expressions and how the people close to him react are all we need to know about his character. Desire, jealousy, and anger comprise the main emotions he exhibits. The movie never concerns itself with focusing on boxing tactics or training. Instead, what happens inside the ring is guided by Jake's emotions. His fears and insecurities are what drive his rage.
Fuck my brother.
Although they occupy minimal time on screen, the fight scenes are truly unforgettable. The camera seems to dance in the ring alongside Jake, as the soundtrack swoops in and out with crowd noise and animal sounds, as well as the sound of flashbulbs that were recreated by smashing glass. Every blow is accentuated by heavy impact on the soundtrack, and along the mesmerizing sound effects and photography, the fights are also extremely brutal. Gushes of blood and sweat repeatedly spurt out, which may be another reason why the film is shot in black and white. Raging Bull succeeds as the ultimate film about the conflicts of a man burdened by jealousy and rage. It's a movie about the low self-esteem, anger, and insecurity that leads some men to abuse women. Jake LaMotta's lack of control over his paranoia led him to battle it out in the ring, at home, and everywhere until everybody around him was gone. In the end, Jake blames himself for his failures as he talks to his own reflection in the mirror, realizing it's his own fault that everyone around him is gone. But then again, the Marlon Brando monologue from On the Waterfront is an interesting choice to close the movie with. In the famous movie scene, Brando, a washed-up boxer, blames his brother for how his life turned out.
It wasn't him, Charlie, it was you.
It may be that Scorsese wanted to emphasize that Jake will always be alone because he could never show accountability for his own actions. While most of the movie we feel disgusted by Jake, in the end, it's mostly pity that we feel.
Let me call you, we'll get together in a couple of days.
You call me?
I will. I forget.
It's an uncomfortable movie to watch, and as hard as it may be to relate to Jake, we can see a part of ourselves taken to the extreme. The ring just becomes an analogy of whatever you do in life, and it's how you feel about yourself that affects everything surrounding you. If you're insecure and angry, it will begin to tear you down. The real question is, how far will you go until you self-destruct?
It wasn't him, Charlie, it was you.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed the video, you know what to do, and if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe to A Matter of Film so you can see the videos we're planning on making. And if you enjoy our video essays and want more exclusive content as well as voting for next week's video, check out our Patreon page listed in the description box below. We're sure you'll find something you enjoy. And a big shout out and thank you to everybody who's supporting us on Patreon already. You guys are what make this content possible. That's it for now guys, thank you so much for watching, we'll see you next time.